Mr. Chairman, during the presidency, we shall organize in Helsinki 2 high-level health-related conferences, and of course, a big number of meetings at the technical level. Our first high-level conference, the Silver Economy Forum, already took place a couple of weeks ago. The conference addressed the healthy and the active aging as a societal change and as a new macroeconomic reality. It was acknowledged that aging should be taken into account in all societal planning and the decision-making, as well as in business strategies. Our second major conference focusing on economy of well-being will take place in Helsinki on 18th and 19th September. Mr. Chair, in conclusion, major challenges and opportunities are emerging. They are linked to chances driven by globalization, climate change, migration, technological development, new forms of work, aging populations, and the spread of misinformation and increasing distrust in science. At the same time, health systems are all over Europe struggling with increasing costs, high patients' expectations, technological transformation, shortage of skilled workforce, vaccine problems, challenges related to availability of and access to medicines. In this context, capacity to adapt quickly to changes at every level of society are more important than ever. In order to respond to changes caused by those megatrends and to achieve sustainable and inclusive growth, we need to promote European social model. It creates stability, which is significant advantage for EU in tightening global competition. EU should aim to be not only most competitive, but also the most socially cohesive economy in the world. Mr. Chairman, this is the direction to which we would like to see the Union go during the next 5 years. The approach we are advocating, the economy of well-being, is only a first step on this path. We hope to provide the future presidencies with a solid foundation on which they can build the future actions needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this speech. I will now give the floor to the coordinators of the various political groups, starting with the EPP, with Peter Liese.
Vielen Dank, Herr Vorsitzender.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you, Minister. If we congratulate someone on their birthday or wish them a happy new year, when we congratulate people, then we don't wish for them to have economic growth, strong institutions and transparency. All of those things are important, of course, but that's not what we wish people. We wish them good health. And that's why in European politics, health must also be a priority. Of course, we respect the treaties, and we know that some of this is within the purview of member states, but treaties don't just make it possible for us, but oblige us to make sure that where the EU has competency, we must act. And the Commissioner for Health was a disappointment. They put forward one legislative proposal, and that's stuck in Council. So I must say that your commitment to try and make progress there is something we welcome. And I think we need to seize this opportunity to seize the opportunity that the President of the Commission is in fact a doctor, and we would like to therefore make progress. The first priority for us is cancer. Manfred Weber, the EPP Spitzenkandidat, made this a priority, and in our negotiations across the four largest groups in this House, we found agreement, that is that the EU should do more to fight cancer. The second area where I would seek support from you is antimicrobial resistance. 33,000 people die every year because of antimicrobial resistance, because of antimicrobial resistant germs. And we think that the veterinary legislation needs to be implemented strictly, but we also need innovation. We need new medicines if the old ones no longer work. Of course, prevention is important, but you also need to be able to cure people when they fall ill. So again, we would seek your support here, and we hope that the new Commission can put forward a specific proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. For SND, Seb Dance.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Minister, for coming this morning and outlining your priorities. It was good to hear that prevention is top of the list in terms of approach that you have for public health in the EU. I asked a question earlier to the Environment Minister about public perception and how we bring citizens with us, and I'll ask you a similar question on vaccine hesitancy. During the election campaign, I and many others were subject to quite a sustained campaign to ask whether or not we would support both the right of parents to not vaccinate their children, but also to support measures to reduce the pressure put on parents to vaccinate their children. And I was quite clear that I wouldn't support such a move to reduce the pressure on parents. We can't force people, obviously, but I'm worried that the current suspicion of some aspects of science is leading to some astonishingly bad outcomes, particularly when you look at the 30% rise in measles cases worldwide, numerous outbreaks across European member states. What measures do you think you can take to build consensus amongst member states to ensure that we put back faith in, public faith in science, to increase the assuredness that people feel about the safety and the viability of vaccines? And can we, for instance, have a program whereby the vaccination approval system in the EU, which is quite straightforward, clear and robust, but I suspect is not very widely known among citizens, that we can point people to the exact process that takes place in the EU to educate people about the safety of vaccines, because if we continue on a path of suspicion of science, then that could take us to a very bad place indeed. Thank you.
Thank you. For Renew, Véronique Trier-Lenoir.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chairman. Madam Minister, thank you very much for your presentation on health, where you don't just look at the negatives and illness, but where you also look at an inclusive, holistic approach based on solidarity. You mentioned the economy of welfare, but there are risks to the environment and to our diet, and that needs to be at the heart of our concerns. Of course, public health systems remain within the purview of member states, but there are certain health issues with societal, multidisciplinary dimensions and multisectoral dimensions, which you yourself mentioned in your intersectoral approach, which are not sufficiently taken into account and could be dealt with at a higher level. There's a fight against cancer. I'll come back to that particular point, but there's also the aging of our populations, the fact that digital health is being rolled out, and the fact that people need to make a return from serious illness. And there are also people with disabilities, and there is also mental illness and I would like to thank you for picking on that. There's sexual and reproductive health, which is, of course, an issue which is important to women, and I suppose that also fits within this wider framework of welfare and well-being. Now, we need a strong commitment from Council to tackle with all of this. The committee is looking forward to meeting the future European Commissioner. We cannot imagine there not being one, and we certainly hope that their mandate is very visible and that they will be very effective, at least more so than the previous Commissioner. Now, the Finnish presidency, is it willing to support a European public health policy which is ambitious, and will you make sure that incentives are in place so that we can have European policies on health which have an impact for our citizens and their children?
Merci. For the Greens, Ruta Parus.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thanks for being with us. Also, thanks for sharing your agenda. And I truly appreciate your dedication to protect EU citizens' health. And I especially value the holistic approach to well-being. And in this light, I would like to bring to your attention a very relevant threat to human health and well-being. And I would like to know if you consider to make the non-toxic environment a key issue. Because you probably are aware that the outgoing Commission has not delivered a strategy on this, although it would have been due last year already. And I am very concerned because as we meet here, a myriad of harmful chemicals, of poisons, of endocrine disruptors, of fluorinated surfactants is entering the environment, and it's also eventually entering the food chain, thus being a real threat to human health. And do you share this opinion that this is a serious hazard and that it should be addressed? And also the ongoing presence of substances of very high concern in everyday objects, such as children's play tools, such as drinking bottles, such as all sorts of issues we use every day. This is a real obstacle to circular economy, but it's also the absence of a level playing field, because there are producers who have met the requirements of the REACH proposal, and those who do not so, they don't have to fear a relevant fine of the member states. So as you're a minister in the country where ECHA, the European Chemicals Agency, is situated, what do you think of the undermining of the principle no data, no market, especially where human health is at stake? And in your opinion, should there be a stronger enforcement? And if so, how can this be achieved? Thank you very much for answering me.
Thank you. There is no speaker for ID. So we move to the ECR group with Joanna Kopczynska.
Dziękuję. Szanowny Panie Przewodniczący, Szanowna Pani Minister.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Madam Minister, I would like to thank you for your very ambitious work programme under the Finnish presidency, and the priorities that you have highlighted are of great interest to me too. The solution that the Finnish presidency is suggesting is based on achieving a balance across the EU when it comes to welfare and health. Now, the European Commission earlier this year presented a proposal when it comes to assessing medicinal technology, and this proposal is to make sure that national agencies can cooperate better amongst themselves. And the member states, of course, are also concerned and worried about certain elements. There's the report on clinical assessments, and member states are to submit reports on this. That's mandatory. And there are also some issues to do with the refunding of treatment costs. and member states fear that the implementation of all of these proposals will be too difficult. And then in December of this year, on the 9th, a new debate is to be organized. But I would like to know what kind of consensus the Finnish presidency is pursuing. What is the presidency going to do to make sure that an ambitious agreement between the various institutions can be achieved? Thank you.
Thank you. For the GUE, Mick Wallace.
Thank you. Minister, the so-called war on drugs has been a total failure. The misuse of drugs must be seen as a health issue rather than a justice issue. I'd like to know, Minister, if you hold a progressive position in relation to drug-related problems and health. Do you see the social risks and harms related to drug use as a priority in the list of joint health priorities? And will you be working on the formulation of the new EU drug strategy and new EU drug action plan? The plans that are due to expire in 2020 were quite successful in this area. My second question, Minister, relates to glyphosate. I was pretty disappointed to hear the Agriculture and Forestry Minister yesterday defending the use of glyphosate. He wasn't worried about its use, only how it was used. And considering the devastating impact it's having, do you not agree that glyphosate is not something that should be allowed near our food chain? Independent science has shown that it is not good for our health and it shouldn't be used in food production. The best science that Monsanto and Bayer's money can buy obviously come up with a different answer, but we should take that with a lot of salt. Minister, you also mentioned the issue of mental health, and I'm glad to hear you do so. I come from a country, Ireland, where we have huge challenges in the area of mental health, and sadly, our government, successive governments, have been very disappointing in how they have dealt with the challenges around mental health. I'm wondering, does the European Council, Commission, Parliament have the wherewithal to pressure the Irish government to do more in the area of mental health? Thank you.
Thank you. So you have 5 to 7 minutes for first answers.
Thank you very much for the excellent questions, and I have them many, so I'll try to be brief. Well, first of all, about the health technology assessment, many of you asked about it or referred to that. I want to reassure you that, as already said, we are committed to maximum progress and that we are fully prepared to meet the challenges of this file. However, I must say, in a very pragmatical way, that the presidency is in the hands of the member states. The challenges might be quite big compared with the expectations we are having. So we are pragmatic. We will work hard to find a way forward on the HTA file, but I can't promise here right now that a compromise will be found by the end of the year. But we have an excellent team here and will do everything in our power to gain success. Well, then we had some questions about let's take AMR first. Antimicrobial resistance. I do not need to stress here in front of you how serious and how important issue and the threat of AMR is. Awareness, education, and the cooperation of all parties and sectors is important to tackle AMR, including general public health care professionals, animal owners, farmers and industry. Everybody is needed. I'm very satisfied to note that the many steps have recently been taken in EU to further strengthen our long-standing fight against it. The adoption of new European One Health Action Plan against AMR in 2017. Another example is a new legislation on veterinary medicines in late 2018. And more recently, on 14th June 2019, Council adopted conclusions on the next steps towards making EU a best practice region in combating AMR. In those conclusions, I believe the Council, for example, emphasizes the right issues, the importance of strengthening the implementation of multi-sectoral national action plans, establishing coordinating and monitoring mechanisms by member states, and so on. So let's say that we need to work more deeply, have better international coordination, and we need to work hard to establish stronger positions of EU and its member states on AMR. Well, then vaccinations. I think you just put it in the right stand. The big issue is that how public faith can be maintained. And I think many member states are struggling in this position every moment. How we can guarantee that the vaccination is safe all times, how we can make sure that citizens have faith in vaccinations. These are the crucial issues indeed. In December 2018, Council adopted a recommendation on this topic. We see that it's time to implement the agreed actions at the member state and the Commission level. We still have work to do. Access to medicines, shortages of vaccines are a growing challenge also for whole EU. One other thing is that vaccine market is actually very concentrated, which means that 4 companies actually produce almost 90% of all vaccines in the world. So we are challenged by different kind of issues which are all related eventually that how public faith to vaccination can be maintained. Well, we had some questions about cancer. Yes, cancer. Let me see. Yeah, cancer. Yes. Well, EU member states share the common challenge, definitely, as population is aging rapidly and the same questions are coming all the way up. The one question is that what we can do better, what we can do more effectively better. These are the challenges which we are facing also. The coalition government in Finnish politics have even quite a demands to make sure that we can be more effective in the treatment, how do we care about people, but we also welcome all efforts aiming at strengthening the EU cooperation in such a topic. Digital health, that will be the last one. So, you know that Finland invests a lot in digitalization, and we have done quite a big efforts by ourselves, but I believe that we have to focus on the fact that citizens are using services, technical advices, which are monitoring all the time their health. It is not anymore easy to say that we just can carry on with the old patterns. So I believe that we need to do more in the member states. We must provide completely new ways and processes enhanced. So new digital tools have to have the potential to enable personalized medicine, but also they can give a great growth in such a field in EU. So the question is how to get a better use of health data. Finland's experience is that we need to have a good legislation. Our new act on secondary use of health and social data enables the secure use of health and social data for research, development and innovation activities, as well as education and knowledge management duties. So I'm challenging all of you, shouldn't we do more? I believe that we should. This is one of the initiatives which we are pushing now forward, because I think that we should share more. We have good practices in the member states. We need to do more to find better tools to make sure that we can cure people, we can get and gain health growth in this field, but also we can serve people better in order to maintain their health. Thank you.
Thank you for the very clear messages. So I will now give the floor to 12 speakers for the whole round of questions, starting with Eva Kopacz from EPP.
Dziękuję bardzo, panie przewodniczący. Pani minister, bardzo dziękuję za słowa dotyczące zdrowia publicznego.
Thank you very much. I do have a specific question to you as to whether in the framework of the Finnish priorities, you would have a more efficient campaign against cancer. I think that is the biggest killer, in fact, in our century. So perhaps a broader initiative might be started under your presidency to have an enhanced campaign against cancer and to use the experience that countries have. But you do need to have more money for that purpose, to create the right sort of basis, therefore, for the health systems to function more appropriately and to be able to combat cancer more quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. For SND, Sarah Cerdas.
Obrigada, Sr. Presidente. Sra. Ministra, seja bem-vinda. Desde já gostaria de enaltecer a abordagem.
Thank you very much indeed, Minister, and thank you so much for being here with us. Now, we've listened to the focus that Finland is placing on mainstreaming health. But it's also very important to take into account the public sector and decisions there with regard to health as well. This is the difficulty, because we understand now that this focus will also be prevalent in the Finnish presidency period, but we hope that it will lead to better well-being and prosperity. I'd like to talk to you about mortality in Europe today from non-contagious diseases. These diseases represent 0.8% of GDP loss. Now, the stress that this presidency is putting on prevention for these diseases is something that's very important. Will you be taking that into account as well? Thank you.
Madam Minister, I'm sorry to have to repeat what's already been said, but
it's such a big problem. Cancers are responsible for the death of 1.4 million European citizens annually, 600,000 children included in that figure. Now, we have improved diagnoses and treatment plans, but an awful lot remains to be done when it comes to prevention, research, and in particular using artificial intelligence. Also when it comes to access to innovations and the inclusion of handicaps when it comes to treating the cancer. The new President of the European Commission unveiled a European plan to combat cancer, and now I would like to make a suggestion to our chairman to amend the budget, which will enable us to finance this amendment. But how will the Finnish presidency take on board and flank financially, in particular, these initiatives? Thank you.
For the Greens, TMS.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to formulate a question on front of pack nutrition labeling. Indeed, several EU member states have started to introduce front of pack nutritional labels on a voluntary basis. Color coding on the Nutri-Score scheme in particular has been shown to help consumers to both compare the nutritional quality of products and to make healthier food purchasing decisions. A couple of months ago, a European citizen initiative was launched calling for the mandatory rollout of Nutri-Score across the European Union. My question is now, with the European Commission's report on existing or front-of-pack labels about to be released, how does the Finnish presidency intend to foster discussions towards a harmonized EU approach to simplified nutrition labeling in the interest of consumers and the single market? Thank you, and wishing you all the best for the next 6 months.
Thank you. There is no speaker for ID again, so we move to ECR, Joanna Kopczynska.
Dziękuję, panie przewodniczący. Pani minister.
Thank you very much, Chair. Madam Minister, my second question refers to AMR. Now, this is something which has been addressed already, but I do have another question because it's an interesting and important issue. Because as a doctor, I do support all measures in order to combat resistance to bacteria and anti-bacteria resistance. Now, by the year 2050, the resistance to antibiotics is going to be a major issue, and in fact it's going to be exponential and could affect millions of people by that date. So in reference to the prognosis from the World Bank, we're talking about health economy, and this is a concept that this covers areas such as health and social economies. But I do think that it's important to promote the health measures, and antibiotics resistance is not only an EU problem. And one of the targets of the EU, therefore, should be to have an agenda established for AMR and to be able to cooperate more closely with international organizations and also with developed countries and to use their potential there too. So my question is, what sort of measures would you have on AMR specifically from the Finnish presidency? Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm sorry, but you are supposed to have 1 minute, so...
Okay.
Please stick to the rule. For the GUE, Anja Hazekamp.
Ja, dank u wel, mevrouw de minister.
Thank you, Madam Minister, and welcome. There are two issues that I would like to address. First of all, agricultural poison. There's a delay in looking at active substances. And there are certain poisons which are very, very dangerous and stay on the market for too long as a result of that. So what are you going to do to clear the backlog that member states have in assessing these active substances so that automatic extensions, procedural extensions for the use of these poisons can be stopped? Secondly, then, I think that if you look at the climate crisis and biodiversity, in doing away with active substances and looking at farming more closely, we can avoid certain issues. I think eating more fruit and vegetable are the way forward, and therefore reducing our livestock and the breeding. And I'd like to ask you what you will do to make this a reality in the future. Thank you.
Okay. For the EPP, Nathalie Collin-Osterley.
Oui, Madame.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Minister. The children's health is a vital question, but health and marketing for foodstuffs is not really that easy to manage either. So I'm looking to hear from you what you're going to do to try to restrict marketing practices targeting children for foods with high sugar concentrations and fat concentrations, and also try to introduce perhaps some restrictions on those products. When it comes to endocrine disruptors, this has been mentioned. They're very prevalent in our daily lives and they are affecting our health. So would this also be a priority issue for you during the presidency? And would you, for example, introduce the same identification criteria for endocrine disruptors as the ones that have already been adopted for pesticides and biocides, and apply that for all products then, including those products that are currently used in toys and cosmetics? Thank you very much indeed.
Merci. For S&D, Timo Volken.
Thank you, Chair. Dear Ms. Kuhl, thanks for being here with us today. The new EU regulation on medical devices is due to become fully applicable in May 2020, so less than a year away. The new regulation is essential to improve and strengthen the regulatory system and ensure that patients and public health is protected, while at the same time enabling safe access to the newest, most innovative technologies to offer new diagnostic and therapeutic possibilities. During the EBSCO session on June 2019, the Irish and German delegation raised much concern in relation to the availability and capacity of notified bodies for medical devices under this new regulation. It seems that there will be significantly less notified bodies in place than currently existing, making a smooth transition less likely to impossible. What will your presidency do in order to make sure that the medical devices regulation can become fully applicable as planned in May 2020? And how will you guarantee that there will be enough notified bodies in place? Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we move to Renew. Véronique Trier-Lenoir again.
Thank you, Chair. Madame la Ministre.
Madam Minister, European citizens' health also includes combating the risks linked to dangerous substances in our environment and in our consumer products. So are you going to take measures to guarantee the respect for the REACH regulation, which guarantees the registration of dangerous substances? The Commission currently deems that endocrine disruptors on a sectoral basis is being analysed, but will you make sure that this procedure in a fragmented way will not delay the elaboration or drafting of a common framework regulation? Then, Madam Minister, can you also tell us how you will influence the impact assessment across European policies for the health of public health and children's health? Thank you.
For the EPP, Cindy Franson.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I would like to thank the Minister for the presentation of the priorities of the Finnish presidency. I welcome the attention towards an economy of the well-being. And this implies a good health for all of our citizens. And there is a clear added value in this field, especially in the fight against cancer, as mentioned by many colleagues. But a good health and well-being means also that we have to ensure a healthy environment and that we have to guarantee safe products. And as already mentioned by Mrs. von der Leyen, we need to move towards a cross-cutting strategy to protect citizens' health from pollution by addressing air and water quality, by addressing industrial emissions and endocrine disruptors. Also, the Council's call towards the Commission to ensure a high level of protection of human health and our environment in general by minimizing exposure to endocrine disruptors forces us in that direction. So therefore, I hope the Finnish presidency will start consultancies between the Parliament, the Commission and the Council to achieve a comprehensive and balanced strategy, especially for pregnant women and for young children. Thank you.
Thank you. For SND, Christel Schadel-Moser.
Tak for det. Som socialdemokrat er det dejligt at høre jeres store engagement.
Thank you very much. Well, as a Social Democrat, it's really great to hear that you're so committed to this and pushing well-being. A couple of quick questions for you. The first one, well, we've already heard it now, it concerns health as related to air pollution in Europe. This is a big problem in Europe. What are you going to do for the presidency to ensure that member states are much better at respecting the rules that currently exist? And what can we make sure to do to make sure they do respect those rules? Another question touched on by other colleagues already. This concerns dangerous substances in our daily lives. This is a big problem for us, but we have to get rid of all of these dangerous substances, and it's particularly difficult because apparently the member states are an obstacle to this. So is there something that we can be doing now to get rid of all these dangerous substances in our daily lives? Thank you.
For non-inscrits, Athanasios Constantinou.
Thank you very much, Chair. Now, I would like to ask Madam Minister to give us the Finnish approach as concerns social welfare for refugees and immigrants, especially as concerns the realistic organisation and functioning of a health interactive system and support. Thank you.
Okay, so we are at the end of the second round, but there are still a limited number of requests for MEPs for questions. So for Catch the Eye, we have, let's say, 3-4 minutes. So there are 2 requests from EPP. 2 requests from EPP here. Oh, you want? Okay. 1 from ECR and 1 from the Greens. You are from EPP as well? It's a bit too much from the EPP unless all the other groups accept. You're not. Well, it's a question of proportion, Peter. Do you want us to remind the move? Okay, so let's start with 2 EPPs. Sorry, otherwise it's very unbalanced. Okay, Mr. Bouzoy.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chairman.
I hope health will be a priority for your presidency. Beside the important issues like cancer, vaccine hesitancy, antimicrobial resistance, e-health and the project between Estonia and Finland is a very important better access to health, which were also discussed during Romanian presidency, and we expect to advance during your presidency. We have some legislative dossiers. One is the health program, which for the first time will not be a separate one, but part of ASF+. And the European Parliament proposed a small increase of the budget, and I hope that this increase of the budget will remain in the final discussions. HTA, I understand that it is difficult to guarantee that we'll have a result, but please try hard, because otherwise it is a big chance to be frozen, and it will be a pity for European patients. And also, European Commission is carrying an evaluation of EU blood and tissues and cells legislation, expected this autumn, and I would like to know if the presidency will make steps towards this in the Council. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Ms. Montserrat.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. I'll be brief. I think that, well, we've talked about three very important things today: antimicrobial resistance, cancer, and mental health. And it's clear that the national public health systems in Europe are making progress in terms of research and more resources, and also improving diagnostics and treatment for our citizens who have these diseases. But I really think that we need to do more and put more efforts into prevention. We've worked an awful lot on prevention against alcoholism, drug addiction, and to improve nutrition, for example. We've also worked a lot on improving the work to combat sedentarism and so on. But we've also been working on managing emotions, managing loneliness, stress, depression. And when you have a healthy mind, you also have a healthy body. That's true. But I'd like to ask you, Minister, the following. During the Finnish presidency, these 6 months, what measures will you be putting on the table to try to improve prevention, particularly in those three areas: cancer, antimicrobial resistance, and mental health? Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. For the Greens, Jutta Paulus.
Thank you very much. And this is just a friendly reminder that maybe I just missed it, but I didn't really get an answer on my questions before. And I have a second question concerning trade agreements, because at the moment there's rumors that medicines which are registered in the United States of America may come to the European market without having to be registered again at EMA, and I would like to know what's your opinion on that.
Okay, and the last one will be for ECR, Madame Deliuska.
Panie Przewodniczący, koleżanki i koledzy, Pani...
Chair, Madam Minister, I'd like to ask you about the details of the European strategy for mental health. I mean, it sounds very serious and interesting, but it's important also that young people should become digitally independent. This is something which we have to look at, but also to take measures against. You said that discussion has to also take place at the member states level, but I do think also that we ought to look more closely into this particular issue of digital addiction. And you know the concept of the issue of blood donation, but a lot of people are being disqualified from donating blood, and blood donors are being excluded from this possibility. So is this something that we could have a closer look at? Thank you.
So we took all the questions in a balanced way from a political point of view. So you have 5 minutes to try to go to the conclusions, maybe 7.
Well, quite a challenge, I must admit. But let's see how far I can get. About the food chemicals, the EU has a complete set of legislation on food safety. And we have a strong institutions, ECHA and EFSA, which are doing a good work in this field. We definitely need strong monitoring on chemicals, but most importantly, we need the whole food chain to take the responsibility, starting from primary production up to retail operators, to ensure safe products for consumers. It is not an easy thing to do, but we also have to admit that when we face the challenges, we have to follow the European legislation and be strict on this issue. What comes to endocrine disruptors, there were similar questions related to this topic. So Finnish presidency aims at making sure that all measures needed will be included in the work program of a new commission with a clear deadlines that are ambitious enough. The best way to create a common framework to endocrine disruptors at the EU level would be to develop a strategy on non-toxic environment as soon as possible, in accordance with the 7th EU Environment Action Programme. Well, about the nutrition label. Few words about that too. The Council is awaiting that the outcome of the assessment by Commission of the different front of pack labelling schemes used in different member states, their impact on the internal market and the need to further harmonization in this field. Should Commission decide to propose any changes to current legal framework, we are ready to launch the examination of such proposals without delay. Then some questions about implementation of the EU medical devices regulation. The situation with the implementation raised legitimate concerns, I admit. The Presidency is following the issue closely. We are ready to work together with the Member States, the Commission and the European Parliament to find solutions. Should this turn out to be necessary, we'll see. But I think we have to work hardly with the issue. A few words about trucks and well, trucks. Sorry that I couldn't answer earlier. We do agree that a holistic approach to truck problem is important. We see what happens all over the Europe, so we should be more investing in prevention, but also to the proper care. Trucks are related to, for example, mental health issues, and we need to find common ways to work together in the member states. And I think multi-sectoral work here is definitely needed. Some of you asked about the mental health. Like I said when I had a speech earlier, I think it's one of the biggest challenges in Europe. If we don't face that challenge early enough, we're going to lose the game. A lot of young people are without education, without possibility to job markets. These are the questions which are challenging us. It is not all about the education, it's all about well-being too. And these issues should be taken lots more seriously in EU countries. So I definitely welcome all initiatives in this field. We had some questions about, one question about the future of the EU health cooperation. As we see how many challenges we have, we definitely should think that the public health is a common concern also in the EU level. What can we do together better? I believe that we have to strengthen the cooperation with such topics, definitely. I think I have rare diseases. Exclusive rare diseases. Okay. Did we miss something? Did we miss anyone's question? Hopefully not.
Apparently no.
Everybody seems to be satisfied.
Well, that's part of the well-being strategy.
Oh yeah, yeah.
From the
I'm
Finnish
promoting
presidency.
well-being here, so. But I'm very delighted that I had these minutes in front of you, I definitely encourage you, work hardly promoting health, promoting people's well-being in Europe. It's all us who can do it. So you have a strong role. Please support our work. We'll support yours. I think we have to find actors who are ready to see what's in stake if we don't do anything. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for the inspiring conclusion, and as you can see, there is a lot of appetite in this committee to work on health issues, so I'm sure that we'll work closely together. So we will start again our committee work at this afternoon. At 5 p.m. And the session will be chaired this time for real by Bas.